Welcome to the Moviegoers Society podcast, brought to you by Nerdtropolis. I'm your host, Sean Tajipour, the mayor of Nerdtropolis, and joining me today is my awesome co-host, Drew Munhausen, the professional media and movie mastermind.
That's me. I'm ready to talk about some of the spookier side of movies. Have we talked much horror yet on this show? I don't know.
Not yet, but it's September, so we're getting into some spooky season. Other than my latest interview that I talked about last week, what I did with the co-director of Blair Witch Project, we're starting sliding into the spooky side of things as we go forward. But in this podcast, we dive into the world of cinema and exploring everything from the beloved classics to the latest blockbusters. We've tackled a classic so far, and we hope to do more. And we're at episode 9 now, which is awesome. And we're going to be diving into the Conjuring Universe with Nun II.
I just realized this is like fate because the Nun II is technically the 9th film in the Conjuring universe, and this is our 9th episode of the Moviegoer Society podcast. Coincidence? Or did we plan it that way? We definitely didn't plan it.
We didn't plan it, but I think Valak did. And it's funny thing is, I was trying to add that up too as I was trying to figure out what episode we're on. I was like, I think there's also 9. So what we got? There's 3 Annabelle films.
Mm-hmm. We got 3 Annabelle films, 3 Conjuring films, 2 Nun films, and The Curse of La Llorona.
Oh, I forgot about that one. That is something. We'll get into it yet, but yeah, I don't think I ever saw that one. Yeah, but before we get into all that for sure, we want to make sure all you can connect with us online. You can find me and Nerdtropolis on every single social media platform at Shantaj and at Nerdtropolis. And you can visit nerdtropolis.com for your daily dose of movie news, reviews, interviews, and trailers. And I want to kind of put this out there. Stay tuned for some cool interviews I got coming up. I'm actually going to be talking to Kevin Eastman this week. I am scheduled to talk to him briefly, co-creator of the Ninja Turtles. And what a great to have him on for our TMNT episode, which I really tried to, but it was just hard timing wise. So I'm super excited for that one. But that's going to be a good one. And then, Drew, I'm going to be talking to the directors, the co-directors of Bad Boys for Life, that third Bad Boys films. They also were behind that Batgirl film that got canned. They have a new film coming out called, I believe it's Rebel. And if I got that wrong, it's going to be really bad. But I think I'll be watching that one tonight and talking to them soon. And then they also are doing, I believe, the next Bad Boys film. I think they're returning for that one, if I remember correctly.
That'll be a really fun interview. And then also, I know with Kevin Eastman, Sean, I know how big of a Turtles fan you are. So just, you're going to have to reserve yourself, keep it cool, keep it calm. No, I know you'll do fine.
Yeah, I've met him a couple times. He's super cool. We talk, comics and stuff like that. But I'm kind of excited to get more of some questions about the brand itself, and see what that's about. And a little bit about the movie as well, and just the future of the Turtles and, what we've seen with the last Ronin and all that stuff. So kind of want to see where the future is going to take us for a brand new generation. And it's super exciting that this TMNT brand has been around since the 80s. And it's getting stronger. It has not really died once. It keeps getting stronger each time, and it's just bulletproof. I feel like.
And it's a franchise that's been around for so long that has had so many artistic stylistic changes, like in the actual animation and drawn formats too. So obviously we got all into that during our Mutant Mayhem episode that we did a few weeks ago. But still, just like it's a franchise that will probably continue to have new looks and styles. And I think that's really cool and helps a franchise to endure in that way.
Yeah, bright future for the Turtles. And Drew, where can they find you when you're not contributing to Nerdtropolis?
You can find me at Drew Munhausen on all of the different social media spaces, X formerly known as Twitter and Letterboxd and so on and so forth. You can also find me weekly over Fresh Out the Podcast, where we talk about movies, but we also talk a lot about TV shows and video games. We just talked a lot about Starfield last week, the new big Xbox release. And that's where you can find me week to week.
Also, don't forget to catch up on past episodes of the Moviegoer Society podcast. We had a great one last week. We talked about the Equalizer franchise. And then we also talked about the first 3 episodes of Ahsoka. I wish we talked about the first 4, to be honest, because the 4th one was pretty awesome. But we had a great guest, JC Reifenberg, the owner of the Scum and Villainy Cantina in Hollywood, California. So it's great to have him. Our longest episode, but it didn't feel like it at all.
Yeah, like you said, as soon as that episode aired, that's always how it works, right? Is as soon as you talk about something on a show and publish out for, for everyone to see is when something cool or new drops. And I'll just say this, because I know this episode, we have other things to talk about, but that new episode of Ahsoka, I thought had some of the best action that we've seen in Star Wars in the Disney era of Star Wars, not just movies or not just TV shows. Like, I mean, of all Star Wars media post the Disney buyout. I still have most of my thoughts about that show still stand from what we talked about with JC last week, but I just thought there was some really strong action in that episode in particular.
Yeah, it's just good Star Wars entertainment. And also, don't forget to check out my podcast, Nerdtropolis Mayor Presents. You can find that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the Nerdtropolis YouTube channel. Like I said, I have tons of interviews with creators, actors, directors, anyone that's available right now to squeeze me in. I'm talking to them. So definitely check that out. But I think now we just dive into the holy terror as we unravel the Nun II. Drew, you ready for this?
I am. I'm definitely ready. And I think it might be kind of fun to start off with like your history personally with the Conjuring franchise and how we've got to this point, because I mean, this is now a decade-long enduring franchise, which is kind of crazy for a horror franchise like this that has 9 entries in the past 10 years.
Yeah, I got introduced to the Conjuring Universe, obviously, with the first film. But at some point, I got really confused between The Conjuring and Insidious. And that is because of Patrick Wilson. That's all. Just my brain keeps getting those films' names confused. I know they're different films. It's not even connected. But just seeing Patrick Wilson and those 2 movies, I always get the names just confused. I always switch the names out for them for some reason. But obviously we got another one to follow up. But the Conjuring Universe is definitely, I love it. They got the couple. What's the couple's names? What's their last name? This throwing me off right now.
Oh no, you put me on the spot.
The Warrens, right? The Warrens.
Thank you. The Warrens, yes.
It was on the tip of my tongue, but I needed a little push. Valak is messing with us on this episode, I'm telling you. But I love the story of the Warrens, and that's what I really love about this universe. I honestly can't tell you what I've seen in all the films of the 9. I know I'm seeing at least 1 Annabelle film, 2 Conjuring films, maybe the 3rd one. And then I gotta admit it, I didn't see the first Nun. I fell off this Conjuring bandwagon. First of all, I don't do horror per se, but I'll watch it if I have the time or just it grabs me. But I love Patrick Wilson. I really love this. I'm going back to it, but I really love the Insidious films. I have not seen the latest one, but I will, I think, this week to catch up on the latest one. But I really did enjoy Patrick Wilson and Insidious ones. And I do love Patrick Wilson in the Conjuring world too. So that's really where my fandom for these movies is really Patrick Wilson and just the Warrens also too. They're just like a 1-2 punch. I really love it.
Well, and also I think you're justified in getting things confused and such because of the James Wan of it all too. Like James Wan directed The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2. He also directed Insidious. So, and Insidious 2, I think are the only 2 in that one he did. So yeah, so it's like you got James Wan and Patrick Wilson kind of across both franchises. And
Aquaman.
and it's exactly why Patrick Wilson's showing up in Aquaman. Yeah, exactly. They obviously have a good working relationship. I like you. I saw The Conjuring, the first one, in theaters. I remember back when it came out in 2013, because at that time, it's kind of like you. Like I really, especially back then, I used to get really scared in horror movies and really get in my head about it. And so I did not like to go see horror movies if I could avoid it. But it was one that were reviewed so well. And people were like, you have to go see this one in theaters. It's that good. And so I did. And first off, I've seen so many horror movies. I actually have really come to like them and I want to see all of them. But back then, not only was I scared of horror movies, but my biggest fear personally, like dolls just creep me out in general, scary dolls. And the opening segment of The Conjuring is the Annabelle segment. And I almost noped my way right out of that theater within the first 5 minutes of the movie. Like, this is not cool. And luckily that's just the intro. And then we get into all the other stuff. But just the whole Annabelle intro, it makes sense that just that opening 5 minutes ended up spawning its own franchise with 3 movies, because that doll is so well designed as far as how creepy it is. And yeah, so I really did enjoy The Conjuring, even as somebody who wasn't the biggest horror fan. That being said, I've caught up on a lot of these over the years. I want to say actually The Conjuring and The Conjuring 3 and now The Nun 2 are the only ones I actually saw in theaters. I've seen all three Conjuring movies. I've seen both Nun movies. I've seen the first Annabelle movie. I haven't seen the second and third Annabelle movies, which I've heard the third one. Actually, I've heard the second and third ones are both really good. So I want to catch up on those. But just looking at these, Michael Chavez, who directed The Curse of La Llorona, ended up directing The Conjuring 3, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and The Nun 2. So, and if you look at his filmography, those three films are his only films he's directed. So he's kind of become the Conjuring Universe guy, it seems like. You know, James Wan directed the first two Conjuring movies. They handed off the third one to him. And that's obviously The Conjuring is like the main part of this franchise, the main film. So they obviously have a lot of trust in him. It's interesting that he ended up doing The Nun 2 as well.
Yeah, and I don't know what that really says. I don't want to go into it right just yet, but I do remember watching The Conjuring 3 now in theaters, and I didn't like it that much. I thought it was obviously the weakest one.
It's definitely the weakest of the three. I thought it was okay.
So maybe, I don't know if what they saw in him, maybe to give him that opportunity. But The Nun 2 is set 4 years after the first Nun, where Sister Irene has to once again confront Valak. But I didn't watch the first Nun movie. So Drew, can you give us a slight synopsis about it?
Yeah, I don't have like a description in front of me, but I did just watch this recently. So going off of memory, they actually do like a mediocre job in The Nun 2 of letting you know, like you as a viewer, Sean, you were probably able to kind of figure it out. But essentially, there's this big church in Romania that's considered cursed, and the main nun in this one, Sister Irene, she's like a nun in training, and she goes with this priest who's played by Damien Bashir to go and try to cleanse this church. And of course, they run into Valak and all the horrors there. And Maurice, aka Frenchie, who's a big part of The Nun 2, he's in the first movie. He's like their guide. He leads them to the church because he makes deliveries there. He kind of leads them there, drops them off, and then at the end, during the final confrontation with Valak, the final night they're there, he comes in and kind of helps save the day, but is involved in all of the fray there. But spoilers for the ending of The Nun. They make it clear at the end of the first movie that he basically has kind of inherited Valak and is possessed by Valak. So that is something that's clear at the end of the first movie. And they tie it into the Warrens, that like one of the most graphic, exorcisms they did, that the Warrens did, was on this guy, Maurice. So that's at the end of the first movie. So it's clear where he kind of fits in. The second movie, I can kind of toss it back to you because that's kind of right where this one sets up. It's a few years later, but Maurice and Sister Irene are back, at the center of things.
Yeah, so I could follow The Nun 2 easily, but I was just confused of like who's who and who was shown in the previous one. And other than the plot and just kind of the connection with the first one, for a rated R film, I didn't feel like this was scary at all. I did not really jump at all. Maybe at once, just because it was just a random jump scare. But I didn't feel terrified from this, and which is very strange because I'm a little when it comes to some of these. And so I was like just expecting more from a rated R film. Are all the films in the Conjuring universe rated R? I might have to look this up. I might be a tough pull. But if you could look that up, Drew, and check that out, because I couldn't see why it was rated R. I really would like to know even why The Nun 2 was rated R. And I have problems when certain movies are rated like that and not scary. The Boogeyman did scare me, and that was a PG-13 movie, just because the Boogeyman is just something that we grew up with as kids with the name, and you really had to have imagination to create what the Boogeyman looked like. And seeing the boogeyman on the screen and a kid in bed and scared that it's underneath. Like, that's really terrifying to me. But in this movie, first of all, Valak doesn't have enough screen time. So that's pretty disappointing. And Valak wasn't really as evil as you could think, really. It was kind of strange to me.
You know, it's funny when you look on Wikipedia or different things, they don't have the rating of movies front and center as you would think with all the stats. So I'm actually having trouble finding out what the different ones were rated.
Yeah, it's a tall order. Maybe it's
like, I do actually want to say that the third one may have been PG-13.
The Conjuring, you mean The Devil Made Me Do It, was actually rated R. It was rated R, and I didn't like that movie, and I didn't think it did. That didn't feel like a rated R movie per se. We might just have to just search what they are, but in general, I expect more when these films are rated R. Like, to be really terrified. I need to be terrified of these types of films, especially me. Annabelle is an R-rated movie as well, so I believe maybe all of them are rated R, most likely. We could just go on that hunch, just seeing a couple of them are.
Yeah, I don't really disagree with you. The Nun and the Nun II are really very similar in this regard, where they, of the Conjuring movies, I think seem to be kind of the most reliant on jump scares. And so it's like the plot in between is a little bit slow and even boring at times. And then the actual jump scares are like pretty well telegraphed, like, one's coming. So I feel like you can brace yourself. I do think there are a few decent scares in both. It's interesting, right? Just like Annabelle with the first Conjuring movie, The Nun, it's a brief part of The Conjuring 2 has Valak and the nun with the painting, and it's one of the better scares in The Conjuring 2. So it kind of makes sense that they wanted to capitalize on that and how truly terrifying the imagery of this creepy nun and Valak is. But that being said, I mean, that's truly all they had going into making a movie of it. So the first movie is pretty light on plot, but still manages to be 90 minutes long and has some good scares. This one, they have a little bit more plot, but I don't feel like enough to justify the length. This one's almost like an hour and 50 minutes with credits, which surprised me.
It felt long. It felt long. And I just felt like these movies don't need much plot anymore, anyways, because the Conjuring movies take place later on anyway. So you kind of know where things are headed with these characters, right? So I kind of want to, I don't want to see more prequels and follow-ups to the prequels. I kind of want to see the universe kind of spawn off maybe to present day, something maybe that could be more, hit more at home maybe and scare us even further. I just, at times, to be honest, I wanted to walk out of this movie, and I don't really say that often. I just was, was not feeling it. It's just the pacing was a little sluggish. I really didn't like, as you explained the first Nun, I feel like this is like Nun 1.5, to be honest. It's not really a true sequel. It seems like it's just a continuation of really where it ended and just another 30 minutes of plot that got pushed to an hour and 50 minutes.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like the way the first one ends and where it sits in the timeline of The Conjuring and how it ties in, it really kind of seemed like a one-off. So it's surprising that they made a sequel, although I'm sure the first one did pretty well, which justifies the sequel. But yeah, I wouldn't say I was at walkout status by any means, but I definitely had some times where my eyes were getting a little heavy. Like I almost wanted to fall asleep, which that's really not good for a horror movie where you're supposed to be kind of on the edge of your seat. But I did think that there were some scares that justified the ticket purchase. Like there's one that involves a magazine stand that stood out to me that I thought was a pretty good scare.
It did look cool. I do like the concept of that magazine one. I didn't feel like it was really a good scare per se. I disagree with you on that, but I can get it. But the way they were doing it and just visually, it was brilliant. That was a really cool just visual to see. I really like that. That seemed difficult to pull off, and however they shot and edited it, that was a really cool shot.
They play with some cool visuals in the first one too, and it kind of takes from The Conjuring 2 because it's kind of how they do it, where it's like Valak will almost be a shadow on the wall and then move into a space, whether it's a mirror or a photo, and then kind of emerge from there. And it's really well done. I felt like the magazine stand was the closest they got to that in the Nun II.
And then also on the wall, there's like a burn mark in the wall of the school or the church where it's Valak's face. Was really cool. If you really pay attention to it, it's pretty cool.
I agree. I thought that was really well crafted. I really like those kinds of visual tricks in horror movies where the lights are off and it looks like there's a person there, and when the lights are on, you see what it is. But like it really does kind of look like that thing. I agree. I thought that was well done.
Yeah, the concept of Valak and just the backstory, everything's really cool about it. But like I said, that's why with the director that you mentioned that was doing this film, I was just like, maybe he could have done a better job of crafting something that was really worthy of being the Nun II, especially the Conjuring Universe that's already brought in over $2 billion. But looking even at the box office, actually really impressive numbers for this film.
Yeah, and it's like the other Conjuring movies or even Annabelle movies have introduced other creatures or characters that are creepy in their own. Like obviously with The Conjuring, you had Annabelle, and in The Conjuring 2, you had Valak, and there was also I can't remember all the names of the monsters, but there's like a pretty creepy being in The Conjuring 2 that shows up a few times. And there's one in the third Annabelle movie that I know is pretty popular. And so, you would think in the Nun movies, maybe they would take the opportunity to try to introduce something else if they want to keep making spinoffs. And the only other monster that appears in the Nun 2 is kind of this, like, I guess this is a slight spoiler. It's just a warning there in 3, 2, 1. But there's kind of like a goat monster that appears, but it's not really very scary. And
it's just Lucifer, right? So like that's like the typical Lucifer that we've seen in tons of stuff, TV shows and movies. That's like what Lucifer is, and I think we even see like that in the Sabrina show on Netflix. There's
right.
So
that's I think they say that. They say it's Lucifer. They say it's the devil, but it's also not scary at all.
No.
It's like almost made me want to laugh. Not.
It's a cool design. It's just real. It's just like a real goat man, and I feel like it kind of took a page of like something that Guillermo del Toro would do, right? That's what I felt like a Hellboy character. Something that would show up in Hellboy, and that's just the way it was. And but that was kind of funny. Those parts with Lucifer, the goat Lucifer, is pretty darn funny to me, to be honest.
Yeah, and the Nun and the Nun 2 are also interesting because they mostly take place in kind of like, historical church settings. So both of them take place in the 50s, but when you're watching them, they feel way more like early period pieces just because of where they're set. So you have to remind yourself of like, yeah, this is in the 50s, and it's just, 20 to 25 years out from like the Warrens being kind of in their heyday and the events of the other Conjuring movies. So it's just interesting. I feel like that's how they justify these movies, is it's all about setting an atmosphere and Valak. And some of that stuff's done well, but just the plot that holds it all together is relatively weak. It's too bad because you were clearly not a fan of this movie, and I found it to be slightly better than the first one. So maybe, probably want to skip the first one there, or don't go back and revisit.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the characters that show up in the Conjuring universe, and there are some really cool ones in here that I remember seeing and stuff like that. It'll be really nice to have them really give these characters their own film, or just kind of do one where they all show up or something like that again. Like, I think Valak is just tiresome of that now. But is this the third time we've seen Valak now?
Yes, if you include The Conjuring 2, yeah.
Show up in Annabelle, if I remember, or make an appearance somewhere in an Annabelle movie.
Definitely
maybe.
Not at least in the first one.
Yeah, so it's a really cool concept, the Conjuring universe. I just feel like it's not really as great as it started. It started to kind of go downhill a little bit, and that could be also James Wan takes a step back. Warner Brothers is not really producing much quality. They do have a couple big hits that they've done, but Warner Brothers really needs to take a look at what they want to give us, especially horror fans. Because also, with the Insidious, the last one, I heard really mixed reactions about it. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to, I believe, this week. And so
Patrick Wilson actually directed the fifth one, I believe.
And that may be why it doesn't, did so well or didn't come out very well, which is fine. Everyone has their, directorial debut. But regardless, I'm going to check it out. I'm probably going to enjoy it. But this one, I don't know. Maybe it needed some names in here. Maybe this Conjuring franchise needs some big stars to really help get it going.
Yeah, and the lead of both the Nun and the Nun II, Taissa Farmiga, she's
great. She's great, but I kind of want to see some familiar faces maybe too.
And she's the younger sister of Vera Farmiga, who plays, one of the Warrens, who's kind of the lead of the main franchise. So
that's part of the plot too, is that they're related.
Yeah, so it's just it's interesting. I like her fine in this. I actually like her more. She's in the first season of American Horror Story, and I thought she was really great in that. I think she's in a couple seasons of American Horror Story.
Okay, now I know who. Okay, now I'm putting faces back. That was a long time ago. So she's grown up.
Oh yeah, she's young.
Okay, that's why I was like, why do I recognize her? Yeah. And it all makes sense. I feel really bad now because she was great in American Horror Story. I don't know how long ago that was. So yeah, she has grown up a lot since then, and I could not recognize her in that capacity.
And the guy who plays Maurice is in both of these. Jonas Bloquet, I think is how you say his name. He's a Belgian actor, but I've looked at his filmography, and it's a lot of Belgian films and things. I don't really recognize him from anything except for these Nun movies. The only other name that's really in the Nun II is Storm Reid is in it. And I actually like Storm Reid. I don't know if you saw Missing this year, but she's actually really good in it. And she's been around in a few things. Like she was on the lead in A Wrinkle in Time and so on. So her being in this as kind of a forgettable side character, I thought was an interesting choice.
Yeah, her character was pretty interesting because she was really tough at times. I kind of liked it how she was kind of kicking butt at times. But it says she's also in Euphoria, which I really don't watch that show. But she was also in The Last of Us. She was in The Last of Us, which I do remember her in that. So she's really good.
That's right. Yeah, she plays Riley in The Last of Us. Yeah, she's good in that too.
Yeah, it's just kind of an odd movie for her to be in this one. But sometimes you just got to take what you can take.
Yeah. Yeah. So overall, what was your star rating for the Nun II?
To many people's surprise, I gave it 2.5 stars out of 5. So pretty low on my scale. We're close to walking out. It just seemed like a waste of my time, unfortunately.
I gave it 2.5 as well on mine, but I'm like less walkout status for me, more of like I almost fell asleep a couple times. So I don't know which is worse, really.
I could have fallen asleep. I could have fallen asleep because everyone was kind of going crazy with this. Some people were getting way too scared, so I had a little bit of annoyance factor too. I asked you this question. I don't think you ever gave me an answer. I think I had like 3 little kids in this movie. They're brave souls, which is fine. I have nothing against them coming to this because to me, it wasn't even that scary. But like little kids will be scared of this stuff. But like it wasn't a movie where I feel like, oh, don't take your kids to ghost stories. I think are okay to a certain point, however you want to do that. But brave souls, indeed.
How young are you estimating? Like about how old?
One seemed like she could have been like 4 to 5.
Oh no!
Yeah, I'm talking like little ones.
Would not recommend. No, I went and saw this on actually a Saturday evening, like a 7:30 showing. So kind of prime time for a horror movie, on a Saturday evening. My theater was maybe like 1/6 full. It was not very busy. There were some older teens that were in there. There were a surprising amount of couples or almost what looked like families. I didn't see any young kids. I saw some maybe like in the 10 to 12 range that were accompanied by a parent. And I'm like, okay, like that's okay if they really want to see a horror movie. 4 to 5, I'm gonna say no.
There are some really strong 5-year-olds out there that I don't know. They loving this like Five Nights at Freddy's stuff. They're like, really, that's like their first introduction to this type of stuff. I'm just saying. My point was that's how weak I felt like the scares were in this movie. Other than, there's some graphic stuff in it. Other than that, I thought the scares were weak compared to PG-13 horror movie films I've seen that are much scarier and have scared me much more than what I saw in the Nun II.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree. I guess there's some R-rated scares in this one, but it's not super. Yeah, no, I think you're justified in your statements. I'm not going to push back on you.
That is fair. Well, yeah, that's our Nun II talk and review. If you love the Conjuring movies, go see it. You're going to enjoy it. If you're a horror fanatic, you're most likely going to like it. Horror is not really our genre. Drew is starting to get really into it, which is exciting, I guess. But I think next week, are we going to try to talk about another kind of somewhat scary movie? Try to do a Haunting in Venice maybe next week.
Yeah, that's the plan. I definitely want to see that. And it'll actually be our last recording before we're at Fantastic Fest, where maybe there might be a lot more horror and genre stuff that we see there that we'll be able to talk about.
Yeah, we have a lot of homework to see what's going on at Fantastic Fest and kind of get all our eggs in one basket and just figure out what we're going to do and kind of split things off. And there's so much to do at Fantastic Fest. It's so great that they invited both of us back to attend in Austin, Texas. That's to be a fun one. Do we know on top of our head what's going to be out there?
I know they're having the premiere of the Toxic Avenger, the remake.
That is going to be, I think, my number one to go see is that one. I think that is the top of my list. And maybe we do a rewatch of the original one. I think that's going to be a must. And I
just watched it recently. Okay. I had not seen it. So when I saw that they were premiering it, the remake there, I went ahead and watched the original, and boy, it is those trauma movies of the 80s, horror. There's something it's not even horror, it's like comedy, but
it's a little bit of everything. And at probably 12 years old, I probably shouldn't have watched it. Back then there's a lot to that movie, so then we have to rewatch that one, and we can tackle both of them and compare them when we do that one. That'll be a fun one. And I believe the creator is also going to be out there.
Yeah, the new Gareth Edwards film. I think that's one of the other big ones. There's a few other horror movies that they're showing that I think are like some Amazon Prime releases and so on. I'm hoping, they'll have some secret screenings there. I'm kind of hoping that since Saw X or Saw 10, whatever you call it, since it comes out the weekend after Fantastic Fest, I'm kind of hoping maybe it'll be one of their secret screenings, but I don't know. You never know what kind of things they have up their sleeves.
And also, I think it could be Exorcist Believer due to
that would be really exciting.
With that date change, they might need that extra push, kind of get the people in theaters when it comes out, because that change of date, they really need some help to get that word out.
Speaking of that, it moved its release. Exorcist moved its release date because of the Taylor Swift Eras concert film that's going to now be coming out on the weekend that The Exorcist was supposed to come out. I believe it's October 13th. Sean, did you pre-order your tickets for that one? I know you're a pretty big Swiftie.
I'm a Swiftie for the end. Yeah, no, that's just crazy though. Like Friday 13th is ideal, obviously, for this Exorcist movie, but it's also ideal for Taylor Swift because I think people tell me is 13 is her number, right? That is the number for Taylor Swift is 13, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I don't know anything about that.
For anybody that's not aware of how, we'll probably talk about it in a future episode when it gets closer, because that'll be a big theatrical release that weekend. I don't know if we'll end up seeing it, but the way that movie has come to be and gotten theatrical distribution is really, really interesting. So for anybody who doesn't know, I recommend doing some research there, because it's a pretty fascinating thing what Taylor Swift's doing, and she knows how to make a lot of money. We'll put it that way.
And if you haven't checked out our previous episodes of the Moviegoers Society podcast, do check them out. A lot of movies we've talked about, maybe some things you haven't seen yet. We did a Haunted Mansion one. And speaking of, that is coming to Disney Plus next month. And also, I think the same day will be on digitals if you don't have Disney Plus. So there's that too. There's a bunch of movies. We're on episode 9 now. Some of them are double feature. So definitely check that out, and definitely check out the Nerdtropolis Mayor Presents podcast, where I interview directors and actors all on the Nerdtropolis podcast network. And once again, Drew, where can they find you?
You can find me at Drew Munhausen on all the different social medias and over at Fresh Out the Podcast every week.
Thanks again, everyone, for joining us for another episode of the Moviegoer Society. And once again, I'm Sean Tajipour, the Mayor of Nerdtropolis, and we will see you at the movies.